There we go. We're live. All right. So we're here with the question of the day. I like that. Question of the day. I have a loss of motivation. How do I get back on track? What you're going to get out of watching this video is hopefully some questions to ask yourself, some things to try, and maybe just a step in the right direction to motivate you. And so, Stephen, let me ask you this. When you lost motivation, was it something you were scared around? Was there something that you were procrastinating about that just kind of overwhelmed you or kind of made you not want to do it that you can look back on when you lost motivation?
Yeah, definitely. So I always felt that when I lost motivation, it always started with I was working on something that was just very hard, and I was like, wow, can I do this? Whenever I would question myself, that's when I knew that I'd reached a point where, like, okay, clearly the motivation, the momentum that I had a few weeks ago is just gone. Like I was not asking myself a few weeks ago if I could do something. I was like, I can do this. And then now all of a sudden I'm questioning myself. That's when I know motivation is gone.
The questioning, what about, because I imagine you question yourself all the time. I think we all do. But was it when you question yourself, the fear of the imposter syndrome came in? Was it the fear of not being able to do it? Was it the fear of the whole dream of being a developer? What was the exact point there?
So it would mostly be the fear of, wow, I have this good idea and I just can't get it to look exactly how I want it to look or work, right? Like when I was developing like a project on the website, I've always felt that like I have really good ideas, but then when I have to build them, it doesn't always go the way I want it to work. And I'm like, wow, like this is taking me so long, or I can't even figure out how to do this. So now I'm making compromises. And then all of a sudden, those little things add up to like a, whoa, wow, like it creates doubt, you know, when you're not able to like execute on like what you want to do. So that kind of made me feel like, all right, like I need to like regroup, tinker around, find ways out where I'm being more efficient with my time.
Okay. So, but either way, this is the first step in losing motivation, I see, for sure. How do you feel like it steamrolls? Like what makes it then steamroll? Like how does this snowball? I know the real thing, you know, snowball effect is a real thing.
It is.
How does this snowball for you? Like what's the next thing that you feel that snowballs this?
Do you mean snowballs it into momentum or snowballs?
Yeah. Well, it snowballs into like all of a sudden not wanting to do any of it and losing all motivation. Because obviously the first step is there's something you've hit. There's a wall you've hit, right? Something you had this great idea on, like you were saying, and then you hit this wall. And then that's just the start, right? There's a middle part that's rolling to where you get to the end of where I just don't want to do anything at all. What's the middle part look like? What was it most recently for you in your example of losing motivation?
Yeah, so I'll walk you through an example. So I was going back to an old capstone that I hadn't finished, and I needed to make some corrections on it and clean it up. And when I first looked at the project, I was like, I don't see the finish line. I don't see the progress. I don't know where to start, and I don't know when I'm going to end. That's when I would say, whenever I'm working on something and I don't know how I'm going to finish it, how much is left, where I stand, and where to start, and what I'm doing next. When that I like to call it kind of like a perfect storm almost. When you have that recipe, you just become so frozen. It's hard to even know where to go, what to do, because you just don't know. You haven't been able to take that project apart. It's just like a giant mess of things, and it becomes so like huge. You're like, how is this possible? How can anybody like take this apart and build a car out of it or something? You know.
I think you've gotten us to our first big point that we can really take away here that I would say to you is something to do when you get stuck. There's lots of little points I'm going to give you. This one of them, one of the ones I'd say, and I know we've talked about it probably before, but goals and planning here are extremely crucial, and specifically baby steps. Like, especially if you haven't done your planning or goals ahead of time, and the goal might be, right, complete the project. And the plan might be start with the script, and then start with the index file, and then start with actually writing a little bit of code out. And that might be the plan, but what if you haven't done that, right? That's when these baby steps need to come back in, and then planning your way out of it is sometimes helpful. Not always. It's not always the end all be all solution, but I would say to you, I know you have a process, right? write this somewhere in the process to go back when you get stuck and replan. But you have to replan. If you haven't planned from the start and you're in the mess of it now, you have to replan with baby steps, the smallest thing possible. Much like getting up every day. If you want to have a productive day, you got to start with the smallest task first. What is that? Making your bed. So I think that's a good point that I think you should add to your process of like how to get back some motivation. So I think you hit a really good point there. I've got another thing. What does your process look like right now with this? Like, what was your process to get out of this? Obviously, it snowballed down, lost motivation. It sounds like this repeats itself. What was your previous process to get out of this? Or what was your idea behind, like, what do you try to do right now currently?
All right. So just to like walk you through what I used to do and what I learned from that. So before, when I didn't have things where I felt like things were not under control, I used to take other people's approaches of how they plan their day, and I would almost try to jam it down like my life. And even if it wasn't working for me, I'm kind of like, well, this is what like a lot of people do, and this is what works for them. And it wouldn't work. And instead of just analyzing and saying like, why isn't this working, I would just keep trying to plan my day based on that like workflow. So what I did is I went back to the drawing board and I was like, what did work from what I used to do and what's working right now? And I iterated on that. And then as the week goes, I keep doing like a review, and I'm like, is this working well? What's not working well? Where can I find room for improvements? So right now what I started doing is I started using Trello, and I broke down the projects into, I guess you call it kind of like Scrum, where it's like, like in progress, backlog, next up, ready for design. And just that way of visualizing the application and the project that I'm working on, where I could plan my day out based on where the project is and then set due dates for that, made the task less overwhelming because I felt like I was in control. Where before I felt like I had no control over the application that I was working on, or just my day in general. But when you can take control of your day, where you know what's going to happen regarding what you need to do, and when realistically you can have it done, and what changes you need to make sure that it does get done, that makes it a lot easier than when you're kind of just going through it blindly. So.
Yeah. No, I like that. So that's that goes right into the plans and goals, and using something like Trello or Kanban flow really does wonders. And I think it gets to the point of like a question, like, what can you control and what can't you control, right? And there's certain things in your process that you can control all that. And sometimes you can't control, though, the code. You can't control those things bothering you. But you can control the process to get you back on track. One of the things that has been said to me before that I take with me, and that is the good begets good and the bad begets bad. At the same time, I was telling you earlier, someone said, call it what it is. And I won't say the exact language, but call it what it is.
Yeah.
So when we talk about good begets good, things like the Trello board, one little step at a time gets you back on track and gets better as you go. But if you go the other way and sit there and don't do anything, it keeps steamrolling downhill, right? So what motivated you in the beginning? Let's talk about your most recent one. Like what was the motivation, and how do you feel? Like what was the motivating part? Was it graduating? Was it starting? Was it projects? What was your most recent motivation that you lost?
So the most recent motivation I lost was definitely on my last capstone, where I felt that it was just, there's no way that I could, after learning React and just loving React, I had to go back to jQuery, and I was like, wow, like how am I going to go back to using jQuery and having to like navigate the spaghetti-ness that is jQuery. So that right there kind of got me like intimidated, because I was so in love with React and I got so used to it. So I would go back to that project, and I just was not proud of my work. And I feel that when you go back to old code or just a project and you're not proud of it, that definitely affects your motivation for it. Because I just finished a good project because I'd gotten better. So my React capstone was just very like visually as good as I could do. And then going back to my old capstone, I was like, wow, like this is not up to my standards. And when that happens, it's very easy to lose motivation because you're just not as excited. Your heart's not there. So what I did is, you know what? I was like, I'm just gonna analyze this code. How can I improve the UI? How can I make this fun again? And that's what I want to go back to is you need to find ways to make a project fun. Maybe it's designing, redesigning a UI component or coming up with like a new feature. If you can't find any way to make like a side project or a capstone fun at all, then you're going to lose motivation. So yeah. I try to look for those things.
Well, that's good. Let's see. So going back and finding that, I agree with the fun. Did you envision ever the end goal? Was the end goal ever something that you lost motivation on? And that's becoming a developer, right? End goal?
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Did you ever lose motivation on that? Or was it, because throughout the course of learning, you have the end goal in mind, you have all these other goals where the motivation comes in, like, oh, I'm going to crush this. I get to finally do a full stack capstone or a React capstone. Did you ever lose sight of the bigger picture at all, you feel like?
Well, whenever I would hit roadblocks, and I go back to how I was saying that I have like a good idea of something, and then when I actually try to execute it, like I realize like I'm not completely there yet where I could take exactly what I want and just tear it up and do it in what I would think would be like a good enough time frame. Like a lot of features that I wanted to build would take me a lot longer, and that would create sort of like an imposter syndrome where I'm like, wait, hold on, like am I not able to do this? And that doubt would definitely creep up into like, can I become a developer? Is this like what I'm set off for? And I just, I doubled down on my workflow, and I just started banging the task out, and then I was like, you know what, I could do this.
I love how you say the double down on this stuff, because I know especially processes, right? I know we've talked about that. Can you explain to anyone watching, like, what kind of process have we worked on? Where have I helped you? Because I know it's not all me, right? It's your process. I've just helped you put somewhat of a process in place. You've totally gone off and run with it and done great with it. Can you talk a little bit about the process you have in place to be successful with this stuff?
Yeah, definitely. So, after speaking to you a few months back, you had mentioned that you need to be able to have a process, and it always needs to be available to you. So I ran with that, and I was like, I'm always going to keep a few tabs open of Trello, and then this other tool that I use to track my time. So that's always there. So I know that whenever I'm working on something, I can always go back to my board, and I could look at what needs to get done. So I plan my day out, and I decide what needs to get finished, when is it going to be due, and I always have that available. And then whenever I'm working on like a task and I get stuck, I look for like a certain part of like my Trello board where I have like a list of things to do when I get stuck. And that's something that I learned from you is when you do feel that doubt coming up or you are getting lost, make sure that you have some steps to do so you don't get stuck or frozen, because that's very important, right? You could easily find a bug and then just feel like that's it, you got defeated.
Yeah.
Of course, we've all been there, right? But if you can say, all right, I found a bug and I spent 10, 15 minutes doing it and it's not working, then I go back and I'm like, all right, well, what do I do next? Well, next thing might be to jump into a Q&A, or it might be to, my approach is when I do get stuck on something, like a task or a project, I put it on this blocked critical path, and then I leave it there, and then I do something else. So I don't waste too much time banging my head against the wall on something that I won't be able to figure out at that moment. Because then if you just keep doing that and you keep on just struggling and not seeing progress, that creates, that starts the snowball effect of losing motivation. So I'm like, you know what, I couldn't figure this out. Maybe at this moment, my head's not wired for this type of task. I go to something else, I get that done, and then I get motivation, and all of a sudden I have more energy to tackle the project or the task that wasn't working for me. And that's kind of like my workflow. I just try to constantly adjust. I look for ways to improve efficiencies. I do a weekly review now. where every week I look at what needs to get done and how can I improve it. And that list that we had worked on a few weeks ago, like, that's changed. Like I looked at it and I was like, all right, like this was working, this wasn't working. I need to do more of this, less of that. And then when you actually develop like a good system, like you realize how efficient you are, right? But when you have like a bad system, you're like, oh, I'm just a slob and I can't get anything done. But man, when you like really figure out how to get the most out of your day and yourself, you realize you're capable of more.
I thoroughly agree with that. I think you've definitely run really far with that and done really amazing with that. I think for this, I think there's another video on the horizon that you guys might see here soon about processes and how to build your own. That might be what we do next.
That's a good video idea.
It really is, because now I'm hearing you talking about it, it's like, wow, I know a lot of people want to do that because I work on that to help a lot of different people out, because that is a big thing overall. Let me wrap this video up.
Yeah.
I think overall, when you lose motivation, you have to embrace it. Like, we're all humans. It's going to happen. And this isn't just to you, Steven. This is to everyone, right? We're all humans. It's going to happen. There's no way around it. But there is ways to mitigate it, to embrace it, to move forward with it. At the same time, try to find that light at the end of the tunnel. If there's no goals or plans in place, that's okay. You can always come back retroactively and put them in. Just start with baby steps. And if you don't have a process, start building a process today of what do you do currently and figuring out if that does or doesn't work for motivation, like how to get back into motivation, because everyone's way of getting back into motivation might be different, right? Mine is probably different than yours. At the same time, tracking all these things is the key, because you're going to see what works and doesn't work. And when you make sure you find that light at the end of the tunnel, it's a lot easier to go towards. More often than not, when people lose motivation, they lose the light at the end of the tunnel and all they see is darkness. And if you could just bring in one little match, the light will never go out. And so one little task at a time, and you'll go forward until you get to the end of the tunnel. And I think the true magic, and not even magic, the true way to get back to motivation is to really kind of, how to put it, have a I'm going to use the word process a lot, but it's one of the easiest ways. Have a process for yourself, whether that's embracing good and doing one small task, or going back and replanning, or is it maybe setting a goal, maybe even adding a reward, whatever it might be for you. That's really the true magic. I gotta stop saying magic. That's the true way to get back into motivation. But I think that's some great things for everyone to take away. Remember, there's always help. There's always somewhere. So reach out if you need it. Let's go do a process video, Steven. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.